I received a mail from Araki Yasunari. I had prior to that introduction never heard of the man, but as it turns out, I had on many occasions come across his writings. Yasunari wrote to me with the request of having one of his written essays published in the Unwritten Quarterly. Attached was a first draft of that essay. Yasunari tells the story about his deceased father, Araki Yasusada. He writes, "I got married 4 years ago, and it is thanks to my lovely and compassionate wife Miriam that I finally decided to go through the boxes stuffed away in my attic. A thick layer of dust combined with old and new spider webs covered the top boxes. Many of them contained nothing of monetary value or sentimental interest. There were old clothes and worn shoes. I picked through a couple of Japanese cookbooks and dated atlases. Others were filled up with dented aluminum pots and an odd blend of partly chipped china. I had almost given up hope of finding anything of interest when I came down to the lower row of boxes. I found in these last boxes 14 spiral notebooks containing dozens of poems, drafts, and diary entries. They smelled of dust and old ink. Skimming through the notebooks, it did not take me long to realize that my father was truly a great poet. Stories he never told me were now revealed one after another, about my dead mother Nomura, my 2 sisters Akiko and Chieko, and stories about the bombing of Hiroshima. He might not have been there for me as a child, but by reading his poems, he no longer treated me with silence. I got to listen to his voice. Throughout the early 1990s, several of my father's poems appeared in recognized journals all around the world. For the first time, I got to experience how it felt to be a proud son. Sadly, that only lasted for a couple of months. They say my father is a hoax. You cannot be the son of someone that does not exist. And with that, Araki Yasunari decided to end his letter. I was definitely curious and, directly after finishing the last sentence, I started on a letter of reply. I told him that it would be an honor to include his essay in the next issue of the magazine. 2 months after receiving the final draft of his essay, I was notified about the death of Araki Yasunari. Araki Yasunari, son of Araki Yasusada, lived an isolated life south of San Francisco without any surviving relatives. He occasionally published his shorter writings in local papers, but always under different names. After his death, a treatise was found on how a new way of writing could change the notion of authorship. He argued that the question is no longer how many novels you created as an author. Rather, it is a question of how many authors you have authored. I could as well be the one who wrote those treatises. See, I once created a writer, whom I used as a tool, so that I could eventually make myself into nothing. I made myself into nothing so that I could become everything and everyone. In the process, I may have lost myself, but what I really gained was the possibility of becoming anyone. I have authored dozens of writers, and will forever be obsessed with creating a false world. In my imagination, I line up the characters that populate my inner world. They all reside within me, and with their own real and imperfect lives. At times I think how wonderful it would be if I could stitch all my dreams together into a false life that I could suffer and enjoy. Nothing in this world would be real, not even me, but everything would have a sublime logic of falseness. I am exhausted from adventures I have experienced without ever moving. I bear the scars of all the battles I have avoided, and my muscles are sore from all the attempts I have never thought of making. In dreams, I have the impression of effort without actual effort. I can enter these battles without the risk of being wounded, and I can reason without trying to solve a problem. I, a pathetic and anonymous office clerk, write words as if they were the soul's salvation, and I fantasize about impossible sunsets and vast deserts. Before me, on the scratched surface of my old desk, are 2 large photographs of impressive constructions in a distant desert. In my dream, I experienced the world of these photographs. I experienced the life of a man who lives his life in an isolated desert. Michael, I see him today from that future. That is a dream, as I see him today right here. Tall and lanky, rugged, leathery skin, frank and savvy, brusque and reclusive. I see his gestures, his eyes thinking within about things outside. It displeases me when I somehow disappoint him, and my soul rejoices when he, at rare occasions, gives a faint smile. From the narrow street at the end of the block, large vehicles are moving around as the road construction of yesterday continues. In a distant desert, I turn to Michael. I give him a faint smile as we watch how his bulldozers give form to his ruins, and the sounds of two distant worlds accompany one another. It is not the cracked walls of my rented apartment, nor the shabby desk in my office where I work, not even the poverty of the streets in between, which I have walked on innumerable times. None of that is responsible for my constant feeling of nausea. It is the people who surround me, the random soul who believes to know me without knowing me. They are the ones who cause my knots of saliva. And I start to wonder why I would not follow Michael out into the desert. The other day I found 2 more images of great constructions from the desert. I lay them down onto the table. To see is to be distant. To see clearly is to halt. To analyze is to be foreign. Today I understand Michael more than I ever before pretended to understand him. I feel his desire and bodily effort more intensely than I could ever have imagined. Today I will be Michael. I will return to the desert, and I will stroll out into the infinity of dried up sand. The cause of my profound incapability with others becomes clear. Most people think with their feelings, whereas the two of us think with our thoughts.